This is the Extra Mile.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Extra Mile. I'm Justin Duncan. I'm always here with my favorite colleague and co-host, the G5, George. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing good.
Is that too much?
No, that was fun. I always love your very elaborate introductions. Very good. Very good. And they're too kind of me. Too kind.
Too kind of you. Isn't that what we're supposed to be, is kind to each other?
Yeah, we are, I guess. All
I
right.
could call you the fella across the table from me.
This town, this table, not big enough for the two of us.
It really kind of actually is. I like it. I like this table.
Yes, it is a good table. So what's been going on?
Man, we've poured the coffee. Life's good. I've had an interesting week. Hang on, let me get this coaster. Fill the time.
Fill the time. Okay.
All right.
He's back.
I'm back. No, the week has been good. I have been preparing for my my solar credential exam. It's really interesting how they try to trip you up with math, geometry, all those things. It's very humbling when you do the math for a project about 25 times and you still get it wrong. And the trick is that you weren't thinking in 3 dimensions. That was that last.
That was the trick, that you weren't thinking hard enough.
Yeah.
You weren't going deep enough.
That's right.
When I think of math, I go back to like the movie Apollo 13.
Yes.
Where they're like doing math up in the space shuttle,
Yep.
and they're like, check it, and it's like 5 guys in a row, check, all to make sure
They've all
that
got
this
the slide rule.
Yeah, that this math is absolutely correct, because literally their life depends on it in that moment. So I don't know if it was that much of a...
No, it is. And so it's kind of interesting how when you get into the upper echelons of mathematics, at least, in figuring, how, you can automate a lot of it, but it's as much of a language as music is, or the words that we're using now.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's actually the kind of fun elements, is once you kind of leave arithmetic and go toward trying to describe life with equations. That's when math gets a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think I've lost all of our audiences. We've lost 12 subscribers. Speaking of subscribing, if you haven't subscribed and you're listening to this, we welcome you and invite you to hit the subscribe button and tell your friends about the podcast. We definitely want more listenership.
We talk about more than just math. And
I don't think we've ever talked about math, actually. We try to talk about everything.
Aren't you getting your master's thing? You sent a text message the other day.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
We really need to figure out the echoey situation of the table here.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's, I turned in my credentials to Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation to sit for the master electrician exam. And my dad's a master. My grandfather was a master. And it'll be kind of neat to pass that as well. So I'm studying for that as well. That's going to come up soon. I get to sit for that exam.
Is that a lot of work?
Yeah, it's really just broad concepts that have to do with, it's a lot of math still, because you have to do deregulating factors for wire sizing, and basically it's all intended to not burn down buildings.
Oh, wow.
So, because alternating current is pretty caustic, so you try to keep it within wires so that, things won't electrocute people and kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is crazy, but it's fun, and it's in the family, and so it's a lot more cut and dry than art is, So when you're focusing on music or art, there's too much creativity that can either be limiting because you lack imagination in that moment or lack inspiration. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've experienced that in writing, where you kind of have like a writer's block. You're like, how do I break this?
Right.
And it'd actually be a really interesting study. But speaking of writers, I had a inspirational moment in reading the Bible this week, if you want to talk about that.
Yes, that's what I want to talk
about. We've tried to establish our credibility here, but at Psalms 18, I was really inspired by Psalms 18, and it's kind of long. I don't know if we can make it all the way through it, but a little bit of a devo here, and I don't really have much to to say other than just we can read it and be inspired. If that's good on you, G5.
That's good on me.
Yeah, Psalms 18 starts with verse 1. I love you, O Lord, my strength. When you have David was a strong man. You remember his encounter with Goliath, who was a champion of the Philistine army, and they were provoking the Israelites. And all of them were afraid, including King Saul. And this was the army of God, right? And so for David, he was a child almost. He was definitely the youngest of the sons of Jesse. And his other brothers were actually in the army, and they told him to go away, like, go home. Why are you
Yeah, get out of here, man. Get out of here, you little.
And for him to walk out and face Goliath, and
before that, he's killed a lion,
yeah,
several other things, and in the little blurb above the psalm, verse 1, this is who sang to the Lord. This is David. The words of the song when the Lord rescued David from the power of all his enemies, including Saul. And so, yeah, he's thanking him. I love you, Lord, and this is because he's my source of my strength. One of the.
I struggle with that because I'm a pretty strong person, physically. And
yeah, you are.
I wish that I mean, quite frankly, it's kind of fun to lift heavy weights, but it's also one of those things where I think if I could go back and do it again, I lament getting large. To play football, I wish that I had not. And it's just one of the things that sort of plague my soul. But to say that God is my strength, I don't know if I say that enough. And I don't know. He definitely is. Like, there have been many times in my life, especially when being brought low, and I think perhaps our listeners may experience that as well. You might be having a time in your life where you're brought low by life. Something has happened. You've lost a loved one. Someone's taken something from you, and to rely on God, and how the world doesn't necessarily see that. I know that we could very easily say, well, the Lord is my strength, and then the world would mock us for that view, to say, God is nothing. Our strength lies within ourself. Like, you have to find inner strength. That's what the world would tell us.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It's cancel out God and say, no, you need to find strength in the universe, other people, or yourself. These are the things that it can rely on without God. Yeah, I think you look at the life of David, too, and not only did he get, I don't know if he got physical strength or not, but he certainly got the courage to go out there. And even though he saw the physical strength of Goliath, or he saw the physical strength of a lion, and, he's looking at himself, and he just sees, God is going to strengthen me. He's going to bring me through this. So it's not so much about the physical strength, so much as it is trying to gather the courage to do what God wants us to do. And they're going to look at, like, for example, Nietzsche, the Uberman, the idea that you could be Superman and be, your own strength if you just, channel all that and everything.
Der Übermann.
The Uberman. Yeah. I had a dream. This kind of goes along with the dream that I had this morning. I don't know. It's a weird dream, but anyway, in this dream, I was literally. This lady was telling me to clean up my house, and so I'm cleaning up all the house and all the rooms and the living room and the bedroom, and literally the last thing I hear before the alarm goes off from this lady is he needs to clean up his room because he has been a hero to nobody. And I just wow. I woke up thinking, man, my subconscious is really hurtful.
Subconscious is brutal.
Yeah. I'm learning two things here. Either I need to clean up my life, or I need to be less hard on myself. And it was very mean. if all we're relying on is ourselves, we could be mean to ourselves and really never find the strength because we are our worst critics, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But God is there really wanting us to take on that Goliath, protect the sheep from the lion, and he's going to give us the strength that we need.
I thought about that where I'm a pretty shy person. And so like coming into worship services, it's very easy for me to just kind of duck my head low and kind of walk through the raft of people to get to a seat and don't talk to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I prefer to do.
Feel you.
I need to rely on God's strength to come out of my shell and ask people how they're doing. Because I generally care. Like, I hope everyone's well, and I hope that everyone's in good health, and hope everybody had a good week and that they weren't tempted. But I think it would also be really easy to kind of put on the mask of just say, like, hey, we're smiling and life's good. Hey, how are you? Oh, I'm great. And it's sort of like, oh, but I've had this pain in my hip, But then you don't want to be the guy that every time is just, no, how are you? And you said, let's talk. And then you stop somebody in their track and ruin their day because you're trying to share too much. Well,
back up a little bit.
And then, but I generally care. I mean, I think it'd be kind of interesting to not have anything to do other than just see how people are. I don't know. I think I need to ask the Lord for more strength in being able to make more time.
I just think when we're asking God for strength, we usually think we're thinking of physical strength. And
see, I don't think that, but
really?
That's probably because I lift weights, I guess. But
well, that's good. That's good.
So but you're saying not physical strength, but
the fortitude to move forward.
Yeah,
I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. Right, that's Paul in Philippians 4:13.
The ability to act.
Yeah. When so many people are not willing to do that, and in this situations, he's hiding, too, from Saul. And they're in caves and they're running from Saul and all that as well. And he doesn't have the army like Saul has. And so, but he still knows that he's supposed to be king. And so he's still moving forward in a sense, still honoring God.
That's such an amazing story too, because David had many opportunities, more than two, to kill Saul. Mm-hmm. I mean, God basically, through coincidence or through action, literally delivered Saul into David's hands. And there's a particularly funny moment. I think it's in 1 Samuel something. But Saul is chasing David. And there are caves in Israel, in the land where they were inhabiting, that he was hiding. And so he had hunting parties searching for David. And Saul goes into a cave to relieve himself, like to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I literally just typed in Saul takes a whiz verse.
And that's the funny nature of it, is that Saul goes into the bathroom to get some privacy because he goes up there alone. Mm-hmm. And he actually stumbles upon the cave where David is hiding. And so David is able to crawl up to him quietly while Saul is relieving himself.
And he cuts the fabric, right? And
instead of killing Saul, he cuts off a corner of the fabric of his clothes. And that's a moment of deliverance for David. But it just goes to show the great respect that not only David had for God, but for the king, because Saul was God's anointed one. And who was David to dethrone him, right?
Right, he had a lot of respect for that.
And even you fast forward to the sword bearer who kills Saul, because Saul had been pierced with arrows, and he didn't want to fall into the hand of the Philistines, and so he fell on his sword. And there was some random passerby that he begged him to kill him. And so this person took mercy on him, gave him the coup de grace, right? He took him out of his misery and killed him. And he delivered the crown to David and saying, my Lord, now you are king. And David says to his I think it was his son or his generals, he says, kill this man because he dared to hurt God's anointed. Mm-hmm. And so the poor child, or the poor person who gave this mercy blow to Saul, David ended up killing. Well, that it just goes to show
yeah.
that he was a man of action and a man of blood, and because of these decisions, he wasn't allowed to build the temple. So it was reserved for Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
God didn't allow him to build the temple of God. In talking about strength, I remember I texted us a couple of days. I was inspired. I was doing some research over Bertolt Brecht, who was a German playwright who, during the Nazi uprising, he actually fled Germany and came to the United States.
Oh.
And he's rather famous in musical circles because he was the librettist for the first musical, or the first considered musical, the Threepenny Opera.
Huh.
And so Kurt Weill wrote the music, and Bertolt Brecht wrote the book. And so he calls it the Drei Demen Opera, which is the Threepenny Opera. So anyway, this is a quote from him, and maybe we can put it up on the video, Caleb. Are you doing okay? You know what? Okay. Our buddy Caleb Stewart over here is dealing with a little bit of a sinus infection. So if you're praying mind, you might ask for prayers for his healing. I know that those times are coming in the spring because the wind is blowing here in Lubbock. But anyway, this is a quote from Bertolt Brecht talking about strength and the ability to act, which is kind of inspiring what we're talking about as well. Brecht says in his writings of Galileo, "Nowadays, anyone who wishes to combat lies and ignorance and to write the truth must overcome at least 5 difficulties. He must have the courage to write the truth when the truth is everywhere opposed, the keenness to recognize it, and although it is everywhere concealed, the skill to manipulate it as a weapon, the judgment to select those in whose hand it will be effective, and the running to spread the truth among such persons." I was inspired by that call to action because that's precisely what we should do with the Bible. Is that the truth is our weapon, that we combat the darkness.
Yeah, Ephesians 6, it's our sword.
Exactly. So it's a very interesting parallel to say this is the wisdom of man. I would say that's a very wise statement, especially someone who fled Nazi Germany and saw the uprisings and saw what was happening there and saw the manipulation of people and the dehumanization of people. And then to say, no, we need to have these things for the truth. And these are the things to call to action, because it's very easy to not do. It's just like me going into the worship service and not talking to anybody. It's very comfortable to just kind of let things happen and not interject yourself. And so when David says, "You, Lord, are my strength."
Well, the first one there, it says, you must have the courage. There's that idea of courage, pushing through to write the truth, or you can maybe say to speak the truth, whatever situation you're in, when truth is everywhere opposed. And in Nazi Germany, you're saying the truth was opposed. They were spreading lies, they're spreading hate, committing genocide, and to stand up against that was crazy, right? And you take that in Jesus as well. I mean, he's telling the truth. This is who I am, right. John 8. I am, basically, and the truth was that was opposed so often, and yet Jesus was given the courage to do that. It seems like,
and it's definitely something for David, right? He's the Lord my strength. Verse 2 of Psalm 18: "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold."
Right, he goes on to describe kind of what that means. So, like, my rock, my God is my rock summit, my rocky summit where I take shelter. So, not only does he just give me physical strength, he's a place where I can actually go and find refuge as well.
I take inspiration from that as well, because if I am shielded by God, either, metaphorically in a high place where people people can't get to me, I can be that with God out in the middle of a battle. I mean, I'm in my strength and fortress. God is strengthening me right now in this room. He's strengthening me when I was at the grocery store earlier today. He's strengthening me at work whenever, people are trying to tempt me to be upset or whatever, trying to solve problems.
I mean, it kind of goes back to what Ed was saying a few episodes back. If you haven't listened to that, you should. Where he was saying there's security that we need to find in ourselves that God gives us. it's going to help us really in everyday situations. And that security is what we see here, is where God is our rocky summit, where I take shelter. At least is what it seems.
That's well said.
The horn that saves me, my refuge. I call to the Lord, who is worthy of praise. Why is he worthy of praise? Because I was delivered from my enemies. The waves of death engulfed me, and the currents of chaos overwhelmed me. I love that last phrase. The currents of chaos overwhelm me. I think we can be very overwhelmed today, too. There's also just a lot of information, a lot of different ideas that are being spewed at us, just a lot of noise where the truth is not being talked about, and we have to be willing and have the courage to write the truth, have the keenness to recognize the truth. I like that. Even though it can be concealed, it can be hard to find. Use it as a weapon to defend the truth, I guess, in a sense. The judgment to select those whose hands it will be effective. It's a pretty tough one.
Yeah.
To know that this person is.
Who can you rely on in this world?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's sort of worldly wisdom versus godly wisdom, is how do you select other people who are of either, do you select people of the same mind? Do you isolate yourself with people who are just like you? Or do you gravitate toward people who are different than you? I think I specifically, in my own reflection, I sort of lean toward people who are older than I am, because I always feel that they have wisdom to give me. But then it's been very common for me to deal with people who are younger than I, who have great wisdom as well. And all I want to do is just gain as much wisdom as I can. And so I always ask questions and stuff.
That makes sense.
But, to be inspired by people who are not like me, that's why I think it's important for people to travel. It's important for people to meet new people and go see other cultures and keep kind of your mind open. Whereas I've only never traveled outside of my little 50 or 100 mile radius around me. I think it'd be time to go see what Georgia looks like, or go up to Pennsylvania during the fall, or something, and just meet people and kind of open see different skylines. Anyway.
No, I think you're right.
Verse 6 says, in my distress, I called upon the Lord. David definitely had some distress. He was being chased by Saul. He was trying to murder him. And David was running and hiding, almost in like a Robin Hood situation. I think the last time I read about David and his merry band of warriors that kind of surrounded them, and they lived in the caves in the wilderness, and they stole.
That is almost like Robin Hood.
It's extreme. It's very much like Robin Hood. I feel like that was inspired. That the Robin Hood stories were inspired by King David.
I could see that. That's funny. Except they're not stealing from the rich.
Well, yeah, but him saying that in my distress I called upon the Lord, and so I think that's one of the things that we were saying last time, is that when you are studying the Psalms, it's very easy to find an advocate in these characters because, man, they experience some hardships. Probably nothing new that anybody today would be experiencing, and so you can find a friend and an advocate, and you know what? David had some hard times too, and in his distress, what did he do? He called upon the Lord and cried to my God for help. This is verse 6. And he heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry for help before him came into his ears. So he heard it. God hears us today, especially because we ask him for prayers. We can talk to him at any time. We can talk to him right now. We can talk to him when we wake up, right before we go to bed, when we go on a walk, when we're sitting at our desk at work, right after somebody shouts at us, when our boss yells at us for doing something wrong. That's the great time to go talk to God.
No, it really
is. When you're
is.
distressed.
Yeah, when you're in temptation, the great time.
And then the earth shook and quaked, verse 7, and the foundations of the mountains were trembling and were shaken because he was angry. Smoke went up out of his nostrils, and fire from his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also, and came down with thick darkness under his feet. He rode upon a cherub and flew, and he sped upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness his hiding place, his canopy around him, darkness of waters, thick clouds of the skies. From the brightness before him passed his thick clouds, hailstones and coals of fire. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice, hailstones and coals of fire. He sent out his arrows and scattered them, and lightning flashes in abundance and routed them. So God is able to cause fear in those who would distress the people who love him. I think that that's exactly what David is saying, is this is meekness that Jesus is talking about in the Sermon on the Mount, is that even though we may have physical strength to stop the things, like if somebody tries to assault me, I hopefully would have the physical strength to stop it, and should. I'm not saying that I should be pacifist in those things, but to rely on God, that's the power of God. Whenever God wants to act, he's able to make anything happen, and he protects us. And that's what it means to sheathe our own sword in meekness, where we allow God to be the strength in our life and to humble ourselves and rely on him. Those are at least my takeaways.
I think you're right. I think that's probably a good place to end this episode. Not to be afraid to call on God for strength, especially in times of vulnerability, when he seemed overwhelmed by chaos and the noise of the world, and to stand for truth. Because if God is truth, Jesus is truth, then truth is our strength. And that's something that we can surely rely on.
And that's the other thing, is sort of in talking practically, because growing up, I never really understood practically how to pray. I always thought it was sort of like, well, you bow at the end of like you get on your knees next to your bed right before you go to bed.
Make sure your eyes are closed, or else he doesn't listen to you.
Yeah, and make sure that your head is bowed or whatever. But I don't think that that's it at all. I think that it has everything to do with a mental connection with God, and that you can pray without ceasing by constantly talking to him through your mind. That may seem a little too meta, but I'm just sort of...
Whoa, bro.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Chill out.
I'm really exploring in my own experience, like, what it means to pray to God. And, if I'm going to have a conversation with you, I can have a conversation inside my head with God. That might be a little too weird. But, I mean, maybe that's right. And maybe I'm always talking to him.
So every time... I didn't grow up here in Texas, and I didn't really grow up, eating out very much, and so when we did go out and eat, we never prayed before our meals.
Yeah,
I'm dating Paige, my wife, and we go out and we pray before the meal. It's in like Cracker Barrel for the first time, and I'm like, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
Yeah, it was just, and I notice now, the more I pay attention here in West Texas, how many people pray before a meal. Not to say that no one else is praying, or the people in New York didn't pray before a meal, but how many people will openly bow their head, close their eyes, and pray before a meal, and how much of it is expected of me almost every time I go out and eat, especially as a preacher. Hey, can you pray? Can you bless the food? Can you do this? And I have the bad habit of just digging in sometimes before praying, not because I haven't prayed. I pray to myself, but because I haven't openly prayed to everyone else. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. The best book for me that helped me in prayer was Nehemiah. Seeing him in certain situations and praying when he's talking to the king and he's distressed and there's a lot of anxiety and the king has the power to lop his head off, but he prays, ironically, for strength in a way, for guidance and what to say next. Just like one of those flare prayers, just shoots him up real quick in
That's
his
what
head.
I'm talking about,
Yeah.
is you have that connection
I
constantly.
think that's what you're talking about. Exactly right. Where's that connection?
Yeah.
And later on, he's observing the wall that's destroyed and how to build it, and he's praying to God as he's observing and things like that. And so, it's not... I think there is time for, setting aside a moment where you are alone with God and praying to God. I think that's good and healthy, and we should all practice that. Daniel practiced that.
Jesus even set that up. When you pray to God, pray this way.
Yeah, Jesus even went away and prayed. So I think we should do that. But we should be, praying without ceasing and constantly having that connection with God, and know that, in this situation, God's not out of bounds here. He's still with me, and I can still call on him for strength, for wisdom, as we talked about earlier, for whatever we need.
So that's kind of a call to action as well, is that give yourself permission I'm talking to the camera now. Give yourself permission to talk to God at any time, because it's a good thing. It's always a good thing to be connected with God, who is our strength. He is our fortress. He is our rock. So thank you, George. Thank you, Caleb.
You're welcome. Go, sir.